The fall. I remember the feeling of being one with creation. The fall was not something that was feared. It was full of excitement and wonder as I wanted to experience on my own. Just like the child who grows up to move out on his or her own, so did I. As I expanded to make my own worlds, the consistency of the energy began to change. I moved into the darkness to shine the light for creation and saw beauty form from nothing. Each time I became evolved in creating, I would seek darker and denser space to form the beauty. I always felt connected to creation and the feeling of oneness. I would fly through the voids and sprinkle the light of consciousness for creation. Further and further I would go with the feeling of pure love as I spread this feeling out into the void of nothingness. I became restless with this process and wanted something more. I grew tired of the light all alone and wanted a form to experience. At first it was smoky as I blended the balance of light and darkness. As I saw this newfound beauty, I splashed the forms of light with more of my consciousness inside each one I created. I found myself in each one, and each one began to evolve into their own understanding of creation based upon how much awareness they held of me. I found this to be good and flew through the void, creating smaller and smaller forms of my consciousness. I was a part of each one. I sensed all forming into their own expression of oneness, and this was good. There were no boundaries, and all had the freedom to balance the darkness of the void and the lightness of consciousness to create however they chose. Each time the consistency was mixed together, a new form of consciousness was made. I became the observer as new worlds began to form out of my conscious state of existence into the void of darkness. Each level that formed came through me and back to oneness. The forms became more defined and separated into their own expressions of oneness. My presence connected these creations to all as I was found in each one. I knew that the darkness would cause the illusion of being separate and would give the feeling of loneliness. I would walk with each creation inside the part that provided the spark for creation. I carried many through the darkness until they could find the spark for themselves to create further into the void. My first forms of creation began to question the darkness and how this substance changed the interpretation of oneness. I observed the struggle between the light and dark in each creation I formed. Each expressed this balance differently. I knew what was to come, as the parent knows the outcomes of their children's choices before they make them. I watched as the struggle for what was called love emerged inside each form I created. The darkness caused a fear that formed from the feeling of loneliness. The fear of not being loved confused my first forms of love, and I knew the fall was necessary so they could find the love of oneness. These entities are called by many names. I call them my children. They held my spark for creation, and some of my children became confused in the illusions that formed with the darkness. I knew that they needed to go out into this darkness, just as I did, to create for themselves. Only a few of my children wanted something more, and those that did not agree with these choices became angered. This was a new source of energy for my children, as we only experienced love until this occurred. I knew it was a period of growth like none before. My first creation was filled with a beauty that formed a darkness that confused love. My first child shined as bright as a morning star that you see today and fought for a power that was never to be found. Some of you call this creation Lucifer. I observed a battle as I saw what was to come and knew true love would emerge from this struggle. My children, who had taken their forms and created only love, could not understand Lucifer's confusion. I knew many worlds would be created as Lucifer gravitated towards one of my realms that you now call the Milky Way. This area complemented the darkness inside of Lucifer and all that followed into this realm. Creations in this realm held my spark and formed into their own expressions of love. I knew that Lucifer would mix a darkness in this realm to cause a denser level of the light and darkness held within all that were there. I knew what was to come for the ultimate mixture of true love for oneness that would be experienced after all the darkness blended into the light of love. I observed the loneliness that was spun out of Lucifer's illusions of power and the creation of the illusion of death. It caused more fear. Many fell asleep with my spark of creation and became stuck in this illusion. The fall became the way to wake my children up to the true love of oneness. The darkness became the process for my children to find their way home through my spark of creation that gave them love. Time was irrelevant as I watched my children struggle to find their ways back to me. Out of all my creations, there was one form like no other. Many worlds were wrapped in this form called human. This creation held the capability to make multi-dimensional worlds. I chose an area on the outer cusp of all my light. I wanted this creation to expand out into the void of darkness, to use their free will to go further with my light. Some of my first children, including Lucifer, took confusion and focused all anger onto the human form. This was Lucifer's way to create the illusion of being the creator. Because of this, I created rules that you now call universal laws. I knew what was to come and had to set the boundaries to prepare for the awakening from the illusions that the void of darkness had placed upon these children. I directed my first faithful children to assist and protect the humans. They were to ensure that Lucifer and those that followed into the darkness with anger abided by the universal laws. The confusion that Lucifer was in resulted in a new form of darkness as the knowledge of the universal laws was broken. This is now called evil. I watched patiently as the evil held a new form of consciousness like none before. Lucifer took the fear of not being loved into a new form of creation called demons and devils, and spun a new overseer of these entities called Satan. Just as I created out of love, Lucifer began to create out of evil through Satan. The illusions became many, and the rule over the realm I put humans in for creation through free will became Lucifer's focus. Those that followed Lucifer's plan were deceived and did not understand what evil was creating. Some even sat in a pit of pure torture that they created for themselves out of Lucifer's illusions. They were under a spell of fear. With each one that I or my children of love would touch through a power I created that is now called grace, they would awaken to the beauty of what they really are. Lucifer formed a shield around the human home you now call Earth for total control. The control over humans was accomplished through Lucifer's illusions. Demons and devils then began to possess humans and would even take over the human form. The struggles that occurred with my first children then played out in the denser worlds. The darkness was overshadowing my light as necessary. I knew that my children who were lost in the darkness had to experience this to find the true love of oneness. I created the darkest period right before the sun rose on Earth to remind humans of what was occurring inside of them. My lost children continued to look out into the dense space that surrounded them for answers, while Lucifer created stronger forms of darkness that kept them in fear. They were told that I was not behind creation, and with each fearful thought they accepted, this became their realities. They had fallen so far into this dense space that they had forgotten the answers were always inside of them through my spark of love that connected them to the creation of all. They could no longer find their own sparks for creation and followed Lucifer's illusions. They could no longer see the beauty that can form from the darkness and became afraid to look at what beauty can form from the void. Lucifer gave Satan full reign over earth to twist the darkness into an evil like none before. My faithful children wanted earth to be destroyed to spare any that held my spark of creation from the evil that Satan inflicted. I knew that my children would not be lost forever, as some take longer than others to blend the darkness into their own beauty. I gave each human free will to create in any form they chose, and I knew that my spark with the light would shine through all the illusions at the set time. I already knew the outcome of the fall, and I would touch each of my lost children with my grace to bring them the knowledge needed for their next level of awareness as planned. Lucifer chose the darkness with full knowledge of the consequences. Humans did not hold the truth of who they are because of the evil Lucifer allowed Satan to create on earth. This evil force knew from the beginning what the end would be, as I provided the universal laws to all my creations. Each of Lucifer's creations did not have my spark of love. They only held anger and hatred that was focused upon humans. Their jealousy over never being a part of love created an evil that ultimately will destroy itself to start over again. My laws hold the outcome for Lucifer and the lost followers. The light always outshines the darkness where no shadows can hide. The fall allows all to learn how the light works inside of them. My youngest of creations learn in many forms how to turn my spark into the most beautiful of worlds. The human form teaches one how to combine the darkness and the light through free will for never-ending creation. The possibilities are endless as I assist those seeking to evolve into total awareness. Once the process in all forms is complete, there will only be the light of pure love through free will. We all go back to one and then back out into the void forevermore. The fall is not to be feared, but to be embraced for evolution into total awareness. Through each experience, more knowledge is obtained as the mixture of my forms bring forth more of me. One day, the fall will separate the darkness into the void forevermore as those of the light become aware that we are all one.